Okay, this is my video submission for CS50 Project 2 movie browser. On the right you can see my movie browser in the emulator, and I'm going to go ahead and type in some titles so we can see the program working. Killing Eve, and I'm getting back 3 results for Killing Eve. On the bottom of the tab navigator we have 2 tabs. One for the Open Movie Database. The second one is for the Movie Database, and those are 2 different APIs, public APIs for browsing movie databases. I thought it would be kind of cool to use the tabs to be able to browse 2 different APIs. So the first one is required obviously by the course, is the Open Movie Database. The second one, the Movie Database, is a little bit larger project. It has a lot more functionality, a little more robust. So I thought it would be cool to play with that one. So that's what I did. But I wanted to create one common project to be able to use both of those APIs. So that's what I did. And then the first one, you can browse for movies, games, TV shows, etc. by typing in the name. Here we're getting back 37 results. If we type in simply Avengers, we'll get back 93 results. Or Star Wars, we're getting back 297 results. So pretty quick. When you click on the image, it takes you to the details screen obviously, and then you can get a chance to see the drill down data from the individual data from the IMDb ID, which is what you search for in Open Movie Database to get the detail for each individual item. Conversely, in the movie database, they have their own ID system. So if you type in Star Wars, they have their own numbering system, which is not the IMDb ID. It is the movie database ID. But they do include within their database the IMDb ID. So that's kind of cool. Same thing. I just wanted to make them look the same. Browse 2 different databases. That's pretty much it. The swipeable interface comes from the material design top tab navigator, which is what I used for the navigator. I didn't use the bottom tab navigator. The material tab navigator can be placed on the top of the screen or on the bottom of the screen, and I positioned it on the bottom, and so we're getting swipeability back and forth. Okay, so that's pretty much the browser. The code is pretty straightforward. I have an app.js, and that contains all of my routes for the all of my navigators and the routes. I will create material top navigator here for the tab navigator, and within that tab navigator I have a Open Movie Stack navigator and a The Movies Stack navigator, and those 2 are defined up here. I had to create a little wrapper screen for the 2 navigators, the 2 stack navigators, because I only wanted to use 1 search screen. I didn't want to have 2 search screens, 1 for each API. So I created a single search screen. Obviously I created 2 at first, and then took out the differences and percolated it down into 1. But in the Open Movie screen, all I did was pass in the API code for each individual API. And in the movie screen, I would pass in this code. I don't do it here because of a quirk in the way that, it's not a quirk actually, it's the way that I have it set up. In the constructor, I'm calling the first one, the first API, in the order of APIs for the navigator. But if you call it again the second time, it will actually overwrite the first one because the constructor will get called again for the screen, overwrite the first one, and you only have the second one showing. So what I do is I jump down to the component did mount, and I use the isFocused method, and I check to see what the route name is, and depending upon the route name, then I change the appropriate API class to the appropriate API for that particular tab navigator, whether it's OpenMovie or the movie database. And from there on, it's very straightforward. I'm using a fetch. I'm not using async await. So you'll see I have 3 different fetch routines, one for OpenMovie databases, and if you have, it's pretty simple. I'm using a simple fetch here with the fetch string that I pass in. If there's only less than 10 movies, I do this section. If there's more than 10 movies, like 100 movies or 300 movies or whatever, I use a promise all, and I create an array. And the array is created by looping over the number of pages in the continuous fetches until I've reached the total number of pages in the page count. And the page count comes from total result, I believe. At any rate, that's it for OpenMovie. And then I do the same, something very similar for the movie, get the movie database. Again, using a fetch with the string I pass in, and I have handlers for each one of the APIs in each one of the classes. And then I have one specifically for a third kind of search for the movie database. And in all of these, you have to set the is loading back to the previous state, which was originally false. Set it back to originally true. Set it back to false. So it stops loading and displays the data. It gets back from the data set. And then in the render, I'm actually calling a routine to find the text that was the user entered, and on search movies will look for that data and perform the necessary validation of query, set the appropriate type, query search type, and based on the search type, it will go out to the API and build an API fetch string. And the fetch string is fed over to the OpenMovieDB, GetMovieDB, and GetMulti-by-ID methods, and those are the ones that call the fetches for each one of the routines. So pretty straightforward. This is the OpenMovie API, and the API is built on a base API, and the base API is just an abstract class that has empty member variables, private members, and each one of those members has getters and setters, and those are used to populate the fetch string for each one of the APIs. So the generic fetch string method doesn't do anything. It just sets up the particular string with the associated minimum amount of variables. But if you go to the OpenMovie API, then it has the exact string that you would need to do a fetch for the OpenMovie API. If you're going to do a search query, that's the only kind of search I'm doing on that one. The OpenMovie, or excuse me, the movie API actually has several different kinds of fetches you can do. You can do a multi-search. You can do a find by MBID. You can do a find by person. So those are some of the additional searches you can do in that screen for the. And if you go over to the movie database, you can actually search for a person like James Spader. It'll bring up James Spader's information. You can search for William Shatner. And you'll get not just movies associated with him, but you'll also get his personal bio associated with that. So pretty cool. It was a fun project. And that's it. That's all I did for my project. Okay, thanks for listening.